more than 100 known to exist.
For centuries, the Roman dodecahedron was dismissed as a bizarre relic, until one was dug up in pristine condition, buried with coins, iron tools, and something far darker.
Oh my goodness me, you found a dodecahedron. I've only read about those. I've never seen one. And every work just stopped.
No Roman record ever mentioned it. No emperor, no scholar, no manual. And yet this object was found sealed like a secret, as if someone didn't just forget it. They erased it.
There is still a huge amount of mystery around these very peculiar objects. But one of the most popular theories is that it had a more mystical function. Perhaps it was used in divination or sorcery or fortune-telling.
What scientists found inside will shake everything you thought you knew about Rome and what it chose to hide. The object, Rome refused to explain.
The Romans were certainly the most brilliant engineers of the ancient world. When we think of Rome today, we think of the Colosseum. All of them are an emblem of Roman civilization. They could discern effective technologies and then exploit them to a much greater extent than anyone ever imagined previously.
For nearly 3 centuries, Roman dodecahedra have surfaced quietly across Europe, and every single time they do, they create the same problem for historians. These objects should not exist without explanation. They are small, hollow bronze shapes with 12 perfectly formed pentagonal faces, each face pierced by a circular hole, no 2 holes exactly the same size. At every corner sits a rounded knob, carefully cast, and sometimes soldered individually. Nothing about them looks accidental. Nothing about them looks decorative. And yet, no Roman record ever explains them. As of today, archaeologists have catalogued just over 130 confirmed Roman dodecahedra. That number alone is strange. Roman manufacturing typically produced objects by the thousands, not dozens. Even stranger is where they appear. These objects are found almost exclusively in the outer provinces of the empire: Britain, Gaul, Germania, the Low Countries. Not one has been recovered from Rome itself. Not one from Italy, not one from the eastern provinces. For an empire obsessed with standardization, that geographic silence is impossible to ignore. The craftsmanship raises even more questions. Many dodecahedra were cast as single bronze pieces using advanced lost wax techniques, a process requiring high temperatures and expert control. Some are so precisely balanced that they can rest evenly on multiple faces, something unnecessary for any known Roman tool. Their interiors are completely hollow, with no internal fittings, markings, or residue consistent with mechanical use. They are too fragile to be weapons, too complex to be toys, and too inconsistent to be measurement devices. And yet, they were valuable enough to be made in bronze, not iron or lead. Fun fact that unsettles archaeologists.
We don't know who created these dodecahedrons or how they were even created, but it doesn't look like it would have been easy given ancient technology.
Despite thousands of Roman reliefs showing tools, rituals, and daily life, not a single image anywhere depicts a dodecahedron. No carving, no fresco, no mosaic, no mention in Pliny, Vitruvius, or any technical manual. It is as if these objects existed in plain sight, but outside official memory. Theories filled the vacuum. Some suggested they were candlestick holders, but wax residue is rarely found. Others proposed knitting tools for gloves, but hole sizes vary wildly even within the same object. A popular idea claimed they were military rangefinders, yet their distribution does not match known Roman military equipment. Each theory collapses under scrutiny. The discovery that changed everything. In the summer of 2023, a quiet English village called Norton Disney became the epicenter of a discovery that forced historians to reevaluate everything they thought they knew about Roman material culture. Unlike most Roman dodecahedra that had been found by amateur metal detectorists, often pulled from riverbeds, hoards, or loose fields, this one was different. It was excavated scientifically during a formal archaeological dig conducted by volunteers under professional supervision. What they uncovered was not just a relic, it was a relic in context, and that made all the difference. As the soil was peeled away layer by layer, the team uncovered more than a dodecahedron. They unearthed fragments of Roman pottery, 3rd century coins, pieces of iron tools, and the faint post-hole outlines of what may have once been a Roman villa or workshop. The dodecahedron wasn't randomly dropped. It was buried, carefully and deliberately, tucked into a structured layer that archaeologists refer to as a sealed context. That's the kind of evidence that changes speculation into interpretation. When lifted into the sunlight, its geometry created a dazzling array of shadows, pentagonal silhouettes layered atop each other. One archaeologist reportedly said it looked like it was designed to react to light, a comment that would soon ignite wild theories. Fun fact, the Norton Disney dodecahedron is now considered one of the best preserved examples in the world. Experts from the British Museum and Oxford's Ashmolean have since requested access for further study. But more than preservation, the find's placement raised troubling implications. If it was ceremonial, why was it hidden? If it was sacred, why was it buried in silence? Some theorists now believe the object may have been intentionally removed from public use, decommissioned, like an ancient relic of forbidden knowledge. Was this object feared? Was it part of a vanishing tradition pushed underground as Roman rule spread? The theories that don't hold up. Once the Norton Disney dodecahedron was unearthed and studied in its original archaeological context, a troubling silence fell over mainstream explanations. Theories that had persisted for decades began to collapse one by one under the weight of hard evidence. For years, scholars proposed the dodecahedra were simple tools, measuring devices for distance, candlestick holders, or even knitting aids. But none of those ideas stood up to experimental archaeology. The measuring theory claimed soldiers used the dodecahedra to estimate range. By aligning holes and gauging how much of a target was visible, one could hypothetically calculate distance. But there were fatal flaws.
It's unlikely that the dodecahedron coding system was invented by the military, but more likely a mathematician, a scientist, or an engineer.
The holes on different faces vary so much in size that there is no standard calibration between artifacts, and not a single dodecahedron has ever been found with range tables, carrying cases, or in proximity to ballista parts or surveying equipment. In short, they don't behave like tools of war. The knitting gauge idea, popularized online, suggests the varying hole sizes were used to knit gloves, but Roman knitting, known as nullbinding, didn't require circular gauges. Moreover, the level of metallurgy required to cast these precise bronze objects far outweighs the need for a domestic accessory. Not to mention, no wool fibers or fabric residues have ever been found inside them. As for candlestick holders, that falls apart on simple logic. Many dodecahedra have open bottoms, making wax containment impossible. They also lack scorch marks, soot buildup, or the kinds of surface discoloration typical of objects exposed to heat. One fun but debunked internet theory even suggested they were early grenades, until you realize they're hollow, unsealed, and made of bronze, not ceramic or iron. That failure to identify a consistent function has opened the door to far stranger interpretations. Fringe researchers have speculated the dodecahedra might have functioned as astronomical devices, primitive astrolabes used to track solstices or star alignments. Others lean toward metaphysical roles, perhaps used in rituals involving light, shadow, or voice resonance. And a small but growing group of scientists now point out that the dodecahedron, a Platonic solid, was once associated with the cosmos itself. Plato linked it to the ether, the element of the heavens, the frontier secret Rome never wrote down. As conventional explanations failed, researchers began to notice a pattern that had nothing to do with function and everything to do with location and silence.
There is still a huge amount of mystery around these very peculiar objects, but one of the most popular theories is that it had a more mystical function.
Roman dodecahedra appear almost exclusively along the empire's western frontier, in regions that were culturally Roman on the surface, but spiritually Celtic beneath. Britain, Gaul, Germania. Lands where Roman law ruled, yet indigenous belief systems quietly endured. This distribution is not accidental. It mirrors the exact regions where Rome struggled most to fully erase pre-Roman traditions. Fun fact that unsettles historians. Many dodecahedra have been found near burial sites, river crossings, and settlement boundaries, places considered liminal in ancient belief systems, thresholds between worlds. Rivers marked borders between the living and the dead. Boundaries were spiritually charged. These are not places where Romans casually lost tools. They are places where rituals happened. Another detail rarely mentioned outside academic circles. Several dodecahedra show no signs of long-term handling. Edges aren't worn. Holes aren't smoothed by repeated use. This suggests they were not everyday objects. Instead, they may have been brought out briefly, used for specific moments, then hidden or buried. That behavior aligns far more closely with ceremonial objects than practical ones. The absence of Roman documentation now looks less like an oversight and more like a choice. Roman authorities were deeply suspicious of unauthorized divination and indigenous ritual practices. Laws such as the Lex Cornelia criminalized magic, prophecy, and unsanctioned ignored, suppressed, or quietly removed from public life. Some archaeologists now cautiously suggest that dodecahedra may represent a hybrid object, tolerated but never embraced by Rome. possibly adopted by local elites who outwardly followed Roman customs while privately maintaining older spiritual systems. That would explain why the objects were crafted using Roman metallurgy, but never integrated into Roman culture. There is also the geometry itself. The dodecahedron was not an ordinary shape in the ancient world. Greek philosophers associated it with the structure of the cosmos. To some ancient thinkers, it symbolized the unseen framework holding reality together. If that symbolism survived among Celtic practitioners, the object may have represented cosmic order, time cycles, or communication with forces beyond the physical world: the light, the shadows, and the residue. For centuries, the Roman dodecahedron was treated as a mystery of form, but in recent years, scientists shifted the focus from what it looks like to how it behaves. Researchers at the University of Ghent and Oxford began replicating several dodecahedra in precision-printed bronze and resin models, not to admire their design, but to test how they interact with natural forces: light, heat, and even combustion. What they found would add a layer of strangeness to an already impossible puzzle. Placed in direct sunlight, the dodecahedra didn't just cast random shadows. The holes projected circular beams that moved in symmetrical patterns depending on the time of day and the object's angle. One researcher described the visual effect as a solar dial without numbers, only movement. When tested during the spring equinox, several models cast near-perfect pentagonal outlines that rotated slowly over time. Could the object have been used to mark sacred dates? That theory, once dismissed as fringe speculation, now gained traction, especially when viewed through the lens of ancient agrarian rituals tied to solstices and planting cycles. But it wasn't just shadows. Oxford's Radiochemical Research Lab conducted residue analysis on 5 authentic dodecahedra from different sites. 3 of them contained trace amounts of burnt organic matter, microscopic carbon particles, oxidized copper salts, and more shockingly, faint traces of animal blood proteins. Alongside those, researchers also found botanical residues: lavender, thyme, and resin from pine or fir trees, all plants associated with funeral rituals and purification rites in Roman and Celtic traditions. One fun fact: the chemical structure of the residue partially matched recipes used in ancient embalming mixtures, particularly in Gaul. This wasn't accidental contamination. It pointed to deliberate burning of ritual substances inside or near the object. That changes everything. The dodecahedron, long thought to be a puzzle of geometry, may have functioned as a sacred vessel, one used in ceremonies involving fire, scent, and possibly sacrifice. Some archaeologists even suggest the objects could have been used in controlled interior rituals, where their light play, scent release, and metallic resonance created an immersive spiritual experience. The Forbidden Manuscript and the Whispering Ones. In late 2024, a team of researchers from France and Switzerland began re-examining forgotten medieval manuscripts stored in isolated monastic archives. One document, long dismissed as theological folklore, changed everything. Catalogued as Codex 134, Mystère de l'Orbe, this 12th century Latin manuscript was partially illegible due to water damage and fading iron gall ink, but it contained a curious phrase that had never been fully translated: Orbis Divinorum, the divine sphere. At first glance, the passage seemed cryptic, speaking of 12 faces pierced and crowned, handled by the whispering ones of the forest, used to hear the voices of the stone sleepers. For decades, scholars had misinterpreted this as religious allegory, but when high-resolution UV imaging revealed the full structure of the paragraph, researchers at the University of Basel noted something chilling. It may have described a bronze object with 12 perforated sides and rounded protrusions at each vertex, a clear match for the Roman dodecahedron. And it didn't stop there. The manuscript warned that such spheres were not to be shown under the imperial eye, and were to be buried when the stars turn thrice upon the wolf's shadow. This wasn't random poetry. Astronomers matched the phrase to a triple lunar eclipse cycle used in Druidic lunar calendars. That buried instruction eerily mirrored how real dodecahedra had been found: intact, underground, near celestial markers. Fun fact: one section of the codex contained diagrams resembling shadow paths, traced in pentagonal loops, a potential hint that light manipulation was part of their function. Modern researchers believe the passage refers to ritual timing, perhaps used to speak to or honor the dead, the stone sleepers. Some archaeologists now argue this document, despite being written centuries